In October 2008, a man named Moacir Jorge da Costa, better known to the streets of Manaus simply as Moa, was arrested in connection to a string of 9 brutal murders. Moa sat in his chair in that interrogation room in front of those officers, shaking, trembling, and stuttering his way through his witness statement. You see, what Moa told the police that day didn't just break the case wide open, it sent shockwaves through the soul of the entire country. This is one seriously fucked up story. Welcome to Severed Soul. So, if you were to create an image in your head of the Amazon rainforest, you'd probably be thinking thousands upon thousands of trees, wild animals, rivers, maybe even uncivilized tribespeople. But I bet you wouldn't imagine a large, busy city, would you? Well, Manaus sits deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, and, well, it just happens to be one of the most dangerous places on Earth. It is quite literally a logistical hub for the global drug trade. Because it sits at the confluence of major rivers leading from Peru and Colombia, it's a primary transit point for the Silamoes route. This has made the city a perpetual battleground for Brazil's 2 most powerful criminal factions, the Red Command and the First Capital Command. It goes without saying that where we have drugs trade and criminal factions, we also have violence, and plenty of it. And here's a fun fact for you. Manaus is considered by the people of Brazil to be the 2nd or 3rd most dangerous city in the whole country. And yet, it sits in the 20 most dangerous cities in the entire world, meaning that Brazil has 3 of the world's most dangerous cities. Now, in many of the city's peripheral neighbourhoods, the government has very little practical control. These areas often operate under crime courts run by local gangs. Residents are literally forbidden from contacting the police and must instead bring their grievances to gang leaders for mediation, so to speak. Walk down the wrong street, say the wrong thing to the wrong person, look at someone the wrong way, and there's a very real chance that you could be murdered. And there's no police force to stop it from happening. Well, in 1989, a former police officer named Wallace Souza decided enough was enough. He decided to take a stand and highlight the dangers of living in a city like Manaus. But instead of taking to the streets and tackling the crime gangs head-on, which would have been stupid, Souza decided to take to the media. So he started off as a radio host on radio station Radio Tropical Cidade, 93.3 FM to be precise, before moving on to television. In 1996, Wallace decided to create his own TV show called Espaço Livre, or Free Life, to highlight the levels of violence in the city, but also to highlight the police and their failure to combat the violence. But unlike other TV shows in Brazil who often censored graphic displays of violence, Souza showed everything. Literally everything. Now, while Souza did give a lot of his own opinions, at its core, Espaço Livre was essentially a crime show filled with Souza's own investigative journalism. Now, the main objective of the show was to expose the harsh reality of life in Manaus, and Souza felt the only way he could do that, the only way he could show the true horrors, was to display the violence live, on camera, in its entirety, completely uncensored. The graphic violence shown on Espaço Livre was unprecedented. Viewers were exposed to close-up shots of dead bodies, like freshly murdered, bullet holes, puddles of blood, people set on fire, you name it. And the show was a raging success, and in 1996, the same year Espaço Livre began, Souza decided to run for councillor of Manaus. Unfortunately, and rather embarrassingly, Souza received only 898 votes, falling tens of thousands of votes short of what he would need to be elected. So, it would seem he just wasn't popular enough. Well, not yet anyway. In 1998, Espaço Livre was rebranded as Canal Livre, or Free Channel. Now, unlike the original version, Canal Livre became a variety show, and this was largely due to the growing popularity of rival TV show Programa do Ratinho, which became a massive national hit by mixing hard crime reporting with bizarre variety show segments, which included like puppets, music, and comedy. Souza recognised that this chaos-tainment model was a goldmine for rating. So, in similar fashion to programmer Dorotino, Canal Livre featured musical acts, a puppet named Galito, and reports of crimes going on in the city. Basically, everything Rotino was doing, Canal Livre did, on steroids. Like, you're going to show a man slumped over dead in a chair. That's cute. We're going to zoom in on the bullet hole in his head with blood pouring out of it. And the show very quickly skyrocketed in popularity, becoming the most watched afternoon show by far, with nearly all of Manaus watching Canal Livre during their lunch breaks. What the fuck? So, people were literally watching close-up footage of freshly murdered bodies while they were sipping on coffee and getting stuck into their chicken salads. Nah, that's fucked up. Souza came up with the genius idea of following police to active crime scenes. And he'd also film murder victims whose bodies hadn't been covered up yet by investigators. Is this dude okay? That's seriously fucked up. Canal Livre would broadcast videos of bodies that were riddled with bullet holes and bleeding out in the streets. And of course, this was all totally acceptable by Brazilian daytime TV standards, I guess. Which is fucking insane. And if that's not bad enough, when family members of the deceased turned up at the scene, Souza would zoom in on their faces too, capturing the expressions of emotional agony that was evident on their faces. And this guy was hailed as a hero. What the fuck? Between the segments of brutal murders, Souza would use Canal Livre as a showcase for his philanthropic side, inviting guests who were down on their luck onto the show to gift them things or give them the opportunity to raise money for, I don't know, bills or something. Oh, got an itchy nose. Souza would actively encourage viewers to send donations into these guests. So he was really starting to be viewed as a man of the people, you know? He was out doing the work the police were refusing to do by documenting these brutal gang killings. And now he was also raising money for the poor. He actually started to refer to himself as the voice of the voiceless, Brazil's very own Robin Hood, some might say. The people literally loved the man. They felt dejected, betrayed and hopeless at the mercy of the local drug gangs and corrupt politicians. He was literally seen as the light at the end of a very ominous tunnel. As Canal Livre started to show more and more brutal murders, the show's ratings soared to unprecedented levels, and so did Souza's popularity as a politician. In the 1999 election for state deputy, which is essentially Brazil's version of state senator, Souza amassed a staggering 52,000 votes, which, for your information, was the highest number of votes ever received by a state deputy in Manaus. So, filming dead bodies really does pay. In fact, Souza would win the election twice more and would serve until October 2009. So, now that Souza was Mr. Big Shot politician, he shared the Canal Livre limelight with two of his brothers, Carlos, who was co-host, and Fausto, who was field reporter. They did actually have another brother called Ulysses, but poor Ulysses was a drug addict and died of an overdose, which is definitely a contributing factor for Wallace. Let's call him Wallace now because there are too many Souzas in the picture. Definitely a contributing factor for Wallace wanting to take on the drug gangs, which he did very effectively. Wallace was very vocal when it came to his discontent for drug dealers, stating live on air that the only way to deal with them was with a bullet and a grave. And let's be honest, Wallace has some gigantic balls for saying this shit live on air. I mean, these drug cartels, they do not fuck about. This is violence on a whole different level. But the more he spoke out against the drug gangs, the more the people loved him. The more dead drug dealers Wallace showed to his audience, the more popular he became. So now I'd say he's gone from Robin Hood to Batman. However, the more popular he became with the people of Manaus, the less popular he became with the cartels and rival politicians. And we all know that only spells trouble and violence. Lots of violence. In between scenes of blood pouring out of fresh bullet wounds, there were girls dancing around half naked with their asses out. There was Gil, the pie man, and of course Gallerito, the puppet. Like, seriously, this shit was mental. And Wallace likes to take audience participation to the next level. So there's this one episode where there's a man and a woman in the crowd. They're sitting next to each other, but they don't really know each other. Well, they do know each other, but they don't know that they know each other. Well, at some point during the episode, it's revealed that the lady used to have a son who was a murder victim. Now that man, the man that was sitting next to her, literally for the whole show, probably chatting to each other, he was the man who murdered the woman's son. Like, seriously, you cannot make this shit up. And Wallace would pull stunts like this just for the reaction, for the controversy, because, let's face it, everyone loves some controversy. But the most infamous episode of Canal Livre came in the mid-2000s when Wallace received an anonymous tip-off that there had been an incident in the jungle. So, the field reporter, Wallace's brother, and the cameraman can be seen navigating their way through the jungle. Then, through the trees, in a clearing in the distance, a third man can be seen pointing towards something on the ground that appears to be smoking. So they're running towards this thing on the ground, and the closer they get, the more evident it becomes that this thing on the ground, which looks like some sort of big smoking log, is burnt to a crisp. It's literally completely charred. And then they zoom in. And that's when you can see the hands. That's when you realise that this is a human body, or at least what's left of one. And it's still smoking, so this murder had to have taken place literally just moments before they arrived. And because of the tip-off, they arrived there before the police were even aware that a murder had been committed. And Fausto, I presume it's Fausto anyway, can be seen and heard holding his t-shirt over his nose and saying that it smells like a barbecue. That's fucking gross. He also comments that it's the body of a man and that there are no visible bullet holes, and also that gasoline had been used, so whoever this man was, he was burnt alive. Now, the fact that Wallace's team had arrived on the scene before the police did kinda raised some questions. But when pressed on the matter, Wallace's explanation was quite simple. They were a popular TV show. The viewers knew that Wallace and his team reported on these kind of incidents, so they frequently received tip-offs, often before the police. In addition to the tip-offs, Wallace said they had ways of tapping into the police radios, which doesn't exactly sound absolutely, completely, 100% legal to me. But what do I know? So it was generally accepted that this was how Wallace's team were able to arrive at these brutal murder scenes so quickly. And this particular incident was generally seen as one of the most controversial moments in the programme's history. But it wasn't the only example of Wallace's team arriving suspiciously early at a crime scene and being privy to more information than it seemed should be possible. So there was another incident where they reported on a drug dealer who had been shot multiple times. Now, this man was very much still alive when the Canal Livre crew arrived. However, over the course of the next hour, they filmed the man, slowly and painfully dying. I mean, that does sound a bit harsh. I know they have this vendetta against drug dealers because of their brother's overdose, but come on, man. It's not like he's a murderer or an S offender. Or maybe he was, I don't know. So it seemed like these gangs were just killing each other off. And I guess that's just how it is in gang warfare, right? An eye for an eye, so to speak. In October of 2008, the police had been tipped off with what was supposed to be a routine drug raid. They arrived at the property with a warrant to search the place and found what can only be described as a shitload of cocaine and weapons. Now, the owner of the house was a man by the name of Moacir Jorge de Costa, better known as Moa. At first, Moa tried to bribe the officers with 10,000 Brazilian real per arresting officer to let him go. And the police were like, Where the fuck are you going to get that much money from, Moa? I mean, from the mountains of cocaine that they were surrounded by, the answer seemed fairly obvious. However, Moa said he knew people in high places who would gladly pay the bribe. Now, as a former member of the military police, Moa certainly would have known about police corruption. But the police were like, fuck you, we want the money right now sort of thing. And well, Moa didn't have that kind of money just lying around, so they nicked him and dragged him down to the police station. Moa ultimately got fired from the military police after being implicated in 9 separate homicides. Fucking hell, 9. Come on, mate, there's been trigger happy and then there's like 9 accidental murders. Anyway, Moa was confident that his friends in high places would just swoop in and bail him out of his somewhat precarious predicament. But as the hours ticked by, it became more and more obvious that Moa was well and truly on his own. Well, eventually, time ran out for Moa and he was officially arrested and charged with possession of illegal drugs and weapons. Now, unlike in the US, where you could be held in jail for up to a year or so, these charges meant that Moa would be sent directly to prison, where he would await trial. Now, for Moa, as a former cop, being sent to a prison full of violent psychopaths, drug dealers and murderers was essentially a death sentence. They might as well have given him the injection there and then, especially when you consider that many of his fellow inmates were likely put in prison by him. So naturally, when Moa is given this news, when he's told that his time is up and he's going to prison, he starts to really fucking panic. Like, he's on the verge of tears. He's shaking, sweating, and he really starts to contemplate his options. And eventually he's like, okay, let's cut a deal. Moa said that in exchange for being kept safe in prison, if you keep me away from all those psychopaths, drug dealers and murderers, I'll tell you who paid me to murder those 9 people. Moa said that he would tell them absolutely everything, and for the police, this was a win-win situation. If Moa was telling the truth, then they knew exactly who had orchestrated all of those murders. I mean, at this point, they had absolutely no idea. The orders could have come from high-ranking police officers. They could have come from crime bosses. They really didn't know. And if it turned out that Moa was lying, they could simply throw him to the wolves anyway. And let's just say, the police were not prepared for what he was about to tell them. What Moa told the interrogation officers that day would not only blow the whole case apart, it would send shockwaves through the entire soul of Brazil. Moa took a deep breath and leant forward in his chair and told the officers that his boss, the powerful man he previously thought was going to protect him, was none other than Wallace Souza. So, it would turn out that our Robin Hood, Wallace Souza, had become the very thing he was trying to destroy. He absolutely started Canal Livre with the best of intentions, but as his popularity grew, as the ratings grew, so did his greed. Initially, he was orchestrating the murders to appease his viewership, and as already mentioned, his ratings went through the roof when he was showing the more violent murders, so that's what he gave them. But over time, he formed a powerful drug cartel of his own, hiring hitmen like Moa to carry out the killings on other drug gangs. He would tell them who he wanted them to kill, where and when he wanted it to be carried out, and even how he wanted the murder to be performed, whether that was a bullet to the head or to be doused in gasoline and burned alive. So, the guy was literally a psychopath. This way, Wallace could make sure his reporters and camera crew were already on scene, ready and waiting for the murder to happen. Then they would swoop in, pretending that they'd just arrived after receiving a tip-off. It was all just really, really sick. And his diabolical plan was working out great for him. The public loved him, views were skyrocketing, and the money was rolling in, until the police turned up at Moa's house. Now, Moa had accused Wallace of orchestrating the murders and hiring Moa to carry them out. However, when confronted with these allegations, Wallace's response was to completely deny having ever met Moa before in his life. He claimed that the allegations were all a conspiracy from his political rivals. But, come on, who would you believe? The guy they found with a house full of guns and cocaine, or the TV host turned politician? Actually, I'd probably suspect the politician. Well, the proverbial spanner was well and truly thrown in the works when Moa's very own wife came forward and said that Moa had made the whole thing up. My nose is itching again. What's that all about? So, Mary said that she'd spoken to Moa, and he claimed that he'd signed the incriminating statement without even reading it after being tortured at the hands of a man called Thomas Vasconcelos. Now, this guy Vasconcelos was Amazona's Secretary of Intelligence, and he was also the head of the task force investigating Wallace. After this revelation, Moa recounted his statement and said that yes, he had made the whole thing up under pressure from the police. And maybe this was true, or maybe he was just scared shitless of Wallace. At this point, Moa was kind of between a rock and a hard place. Grass on Wallace, get murdered by Wallace. Or accept the charges, get sent down for murder, and get murdered by your fellow inmates, who you probably arrested in the first place. Sucks to be you, mate. Now, the case would take yet another twist when Vasconcelos was disturbed by a knock on his office door. The officer got up from his desk and opened the door, where he was presented with an anonymous package. Wondering what the hell the package could be, Vasconcelos took his penknife and sliced the package open. And when he opened the package and saw what was inside, a beaming smile stretched right across his face. The package consisted of a photograph, which clearly shows Wallace and Moa chilling together in a swimming pool. Yeah, that's a little bit sus, not gonna lie. When presented with the evidence, Wallace was like, ooh, him. Yeah, I didn't know his name was Moa, I always called him Jorge. When asked how he knew Jorge, Wallace nonchalantly claimed that Jorge was his son Raphael's jiu-jitsu instructor. Simple. Now, fortunately for the task force, they didn't have to rely solely on the contradictory statements from Moa and Mary. There were other witness statements from Wallace's associates' financial records that allegedly linked him to organised crime. And most importantly, phone calls were recorded from wiretaps. This was more than enough evidence to convince the task force that Wallace was indeed a very violent and dangerous criminal. With a warrant to search Wallace's property, the task force made their move. Now, the search was largely limited to Wallace's son Raphael's bedroom and his car, where it's safe to say they found a shit ton of evidence. Inside the car, they found, get this, 380 pistol magazines. What the fuck? Now, depending on the size of the mags, that would equate to anywhere between 5,700 bullets to over 11,000, which is total fucking overkill, for want of a better term. I mean, how the fuck are you going to explain your way out of that? And if that wasn't already enough evidence, in Raphael's bedroom, they found a shit ton of guns, more ammunition, and the equivalent to around $100,000 in cash. Fucking hell, mate, you're not doing yourself any favours here. And things just got worse from there. Probably the most incriminating and concerning piece of evidence found in Raphael's bedroom was a list of names. And this was no list of party invites. This list contained the names of well-known drug dealers, some of whom had already been killed. So, not surprisingly, Raphael was arrested in connection to the murders. On October the 1st, 2009, Wallace was impeached and removed from office. A warrant was issued for his arrest almost immediately, and Wallace went on the run. Now, after 4 days, the police found Wallace hiding out at a friend's house, and he agreed to go with them voluntarily so long as he was held in a separate cell away from anyone he'd previously helped to put behind bars. What the fuck? I'd be like, no, you cheeky cunt. How about you come with us quietly, or we smash your fucking teeth in? So now Wallace, Moa and Raphael were all behind bars, along with a number of alleged conspirators. Unfortunately, there would be no conclusion to this trial. After days of being a fugitive, turning himself in and losing his political immunity, his health, which had been failing for a while, finally gave out. He was only 51 years old. He died in a hospital in Sao Paulo from a heart attack, though the underlying cause was a rare condition called Budd-Chiari syndrome, which affects the liver. Now, because he died before his trial could reach a final verdict, he technically took the truth to the grave. To his supporters, he died a martyr, a man hounded to death by a corrupt system. Fuck off. To his detractors, he escaped justice by dying just before the law could truly pin him down. But it would be Moa who would suffer the worst fate. On January 1st, 2017, a massive riot broke out at the prison. Now, this wasn't just a random uprising. It was a coordinated hit by the North Family, or FDN, drug cartel against their rivals. The riot lasted 17 hours and resulted in the deaths of 56 inmates, including decapitations. A mob of armed inmates targeted Moa's cell. They were absolutely furious that he'd cooperated with the police years earlier, basically calling him a snitch, effectively breaking the code of silence that governed the Manaus underworld. So Moa reportedly retreated to the very back of his cell, pressing himself against the wall and pleading for his life as the mob hacked at the lock with machetes. Moa reportedly retreated to the very back of his cell, pressing himself against the wall and pleading for his life as the mob hacked at the locks with machetes. In a chilling echo of the burning body episode that made Canal Livre famous, the inmates couldn't get the cell door open fast enough. So instead, they reached through the bars with a lighter and set his mattress on fire. Trapped in his cell, with nowhere to run, Moa burned alive. As for Raphael, in 2012, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for the murder of drug dealer Cleomir Bernardino. He was also convicted on charges of drug trafficking and illegal possession of a restricted firearm. He served a significant portion of his initial 9-year sentence, and many of the most serious additional charges against him have been whittled away by the Brazilian appeals process. And that's the end of that totally fucked up story. If you enjoyed it, go down, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. Thanks for watching. I'm Severed Soul and I'll see you in the next one.